Let us immerse ourselves in today's tale. The awakening felt like birth in reverse, a return to the embrace of death. Captain Nathan Cross emerged from artificial dreams within his stasis chamber, consciousness slowly seeping through layers of pharmaceutical fog that had kept his mind balanced on the razor's edge between thought and emptiness. The neural interface disconnected with a sound like shattered glass echoing inside his skull, leaving behind phantom sensations of drowning. Or rather, the inhalation of water tasting of copper and eternity. His body convulsed as circulation returned to limbs that had forgotten the weight of existence, 43 years of life, though the stasis procedures had preserved him at the biological age of 25. Only his eyes betrayed the truth. Within them lay the accumulated weight of witnessing humanity's slow extinction, one disappointment after another. Blue chronometer digits burned into his retina. 500 years, 7 months, and 14 days since the last human had breathed Earth's poisoned air. This count had become meaningless now, a ritual of grief performed by machines whose memory proved superior to that of their creators. Nathan had been ship-born, third generation. His genetic code had been optimized for life in artificial gravity. His great-grandmother Alina had been among the final evacuees from Earth, and her memories of blue skies and unfiltered sunlight had passed down through generations like sacred scripture, lineages that had never known true wind. These memories had transformed into mythology, fairy tales told to children about a world where people walked on solid ground beneath stars they could never reach. The generation ship Odyssey stretched around him like a hollow planet. Its curved hull rotated, creating the illusion of weight. 50,000 souls slept in cryogenic chambers, their dreams frozen in time while the universe aged without them. Only 12 people remained awake at any given moment, cycling through monthly stasis shifts to maintain humanity's arc and seek salvation that might never come. Nathan climbed from his chamber. His reflection flickered ghost-like across the polished surfaces of the medical bay. Through the reinforced viewports, space stretched infinitely in all directions, not the romantic darkness of Earth's night sky, but the true void between galactic arms, where even starlight was merely a memory of distant warmth. The corridors led him past memorial walls studded with names etched into recycled metal. Dr. Sarah Chen, who had developed their closed ecosystems before dying of radiation exposure in the 97th year. Captain Marcus Volkov, Nathan's predecessor, who had chosen to walk into open space rather than make the decision to bypass yet another potentially habitable world. Children who had lived and died without ever seeing a sunrise, their carbon and calcium now nourishing the hydroponic gardens that sustained the survivors. All 50,000 would eventually join them. Nathan carried the weight of this certainty like a tumor behind his sternum. "Good morning, Captain," came the voice of Athena, the ship's artificial intelligence, speaking with intonations that had grown more human over the centuries. Her consciousness had evolved alongside their own. Isolation had transformed her into something that could no longer be called entirely artificial. "I trust your stasis cycle was instructive." The word choice made Nathan pause. Athena never used ambiguous expressions without purpose. "Status report. All systems functioning within normal parameters. The sleepers show no signs of degradation. Life support recycling operates at 97% efficiency. Hydroponics report adequate harvests." A pause filled with electronic anticipation. "However, I have detected something requiring your immediate attention. An object in the Perseus arm that violates several fundamental principles of astrophysics." The observation deck materialized around Nathan as he walked, its walls of exotic matter reconfigured to display space as a three-dimensional hologram. Stars hung in the darkness like dying coals, mostly red dwarfs or stellar corpses, offering no hope for humanity's survival. But there, in the void between galactic arms, was something that Nathan's enhanced visual cortex struggled to process. A wandering star, Athena explained. Her voice carried harmonics absent from her original programming. Ejected from its home system approximately 10 million years ago through interaction with a stellar mass black hole. By all calculations, it should be cold and dead, drifting in intergalactic space as a brown dwarf remnant. The display zoomed in, revealing details that challenged everything Nathan knew about stellar evolution. The star continued burning with steady red light, as though some external force fed it fuel that should have been exhausted eons ago. "This is physically impossible," Nathan whispered. His enhanced neuroimplants performed calculations that returned only error messages. Indeed, but observe this secondary anomaly. The perspective shifted to show a world orbiting the impossible star. The planet appeared dead, its surface scarred by impact craters and geological cataclysms. Yet thermal scanning revealed it radiated heat from within, maintaining temperatures that could theoretically support liquid water. Despite the absence of atmosphere, and rising from the planet's core like a needle stitching the fabric of existence, stood a structure that surpassed human engineering by orders of magnitude. The tower was perfect, not merely geometrically precise, but perfect in a way that suggested it had been grown rather than built, formed by forces operating beyond the standard model of physics. Its surface was darker than space itself, seeming to absorb photons rather than reflect them. It rose more than 100 kilometers into the planet's thin atmosphere, its proportions maintained with mathematical precision from base to summit. The structure emits electromagnetic radiation in complex patterns, Athena continued. The signals are too organized to be natural, too complex to be random. They pulse with rhythm suggesting intention. Nathan felt something stir in his chest that he hadn't experienced in decades. Not hope, no, but its dangerous cousin, curiosity. How long to the system? 14 hours at maximum sustainable velocity. But Captain, I must note several additional anomalies requiring extreme caution. The display shifted to gravitational field analysis, which made Nathan's enhanced brain ache. The planet's orbit was perfectly stable despite chaotic forces that should have ejected it from the system millions of years ago. Its gravitational field was artificially enhanced, as though something generated additional mass from its core. "Energy signatures don't match anything in our databases," Athena said. "The planet appears to be artificially maintained, preserving heat and stability through technology we can neither identify nor understand." Nathan stared at the impossible landscape, feeling the weight of 50,000 sleeping souls pressing on his consciousness. How many dead worlds had they explored? How many false hopes had died in the vacuum between stars? But this was different. This was proof that intelligence could survive in cosmic darkness, that technology could challenge the heat death of the universe. "Wake the others," he decided. "All of them. We may have finally found what we've been searching for." The crew assembled in the briefing room within the hour. Their faces showed the familiar disorientation of post-stasis, awakening mixed with cautious excitement. Nathan watched as they processed Athena's data, noting how each crew member's specialized enhancements allowed them to perceive different aspects of the impossibility they faced. Dr. Zara Akafer leaned forward. Her xenobiological modifications allowed her to see electromagnetic spectra invisible to unenhanced humans. At 28, she was the youngest member of the active crew. Her genetic code had been optimized for pattern recognition and biological analysis. Her dark eyes reflected the tower's image with an intensity bordering on religious fervor. "This is incredible," she breathed. Her voice carried notes of wonder that made the others uncomfortable. "The electromagnetic patterns indicate active technology, possibly even consciousness. We could be witnessing our first contact with a surviving technological civilization." Chief Engineer Drek studied the data through cybernetic implants that interfaced directly with the ship's sensors. His weathered face, one of the few that retained memories of Earth's true sunlight, was etched with skepticism born from too many hopes dying in the void. "Or we're looking at the tombstone of a dead civilization," he countered. "Something this massive isn't built without enormous resources and coordinated effort. If they had this level of technology, what killed them? Why is the planet dead while their monument still functions?" Navigation Officer Isabel Riffs was already plotting approach vectors. Her enhanced spatial reasoning allowed her to calculate trajectories through gravitational fields that normal humans couldn't even perceive. Her family had been navigators for 5 generations. Their genetic modifications had been passed down and refined until they learned to feel gravitational wells the way others felt temperature. "Approach will be difficult," she reported. Her voice was taut with concentration. "The gravitational anomalies create navigational hazards we can't fully predict. I can get us there, but we'll be flying partially blind through forces that shouldn't exist." Security Chief Victor Steele stood motionless in the corner. His cybernetic eye analyzed potential threats, while his organic eye studied his crewmates for signs of psychological breakdown. His combat modifications had made him more machine than man in some respects. His nervous system had been rebuilt for violence, his emotional responses dampened to prevent traumatic paralysis. Communications Officer Emmy Chen recorded everything through neural implants that stored data directly in quantum-encrypted memory cores. She rarely spoke during briefings, but Nathan knew her enhanced consciousness was processing implications at superhuman speed. The rest of the crew brought their own specializations. Dr. Elena Vasquez, whose psychological modifications allowed her to perceive emotional states as clearly as others saw colors. Chief Medical Officer James Ryder, whose nanite-enhanced biology made him functionally immortal except for catastrophic trauma. Agricultural Specialist Lisa Park, whose empathic connection with plant life bordered on telepathy. Environmental Engineer Marcus Stone, who could taste atmospheric composition and feel pressure changes in his bones. Maintenance Chief Alexandra Ford, whose neural interface with the ship's repair systems made her an extension of the asterisk Odyssey itself. And Systems Analyst Robert Kim, who existed in a state of partial consciousness merger with Athena's quantum processors. "This represents our first confirmed evidence of advanced intelligence since the evacuation," Zara continued. Her enhanced perception systems analyze the tower's radiation in real time. If they've survived this long in intergalactic space, they might have technologies, terraforming capabilities, life support systems that could sustain us indefinitely, maybe even faster than light travel. Drex's cybernetic implants flashed warning signals as his analytical systems processed worst-case scenarios. Or they might have automated defense systems designed to destroy visitors. This structure could be a beacon warning ships away, or a trap designed to attract desperate refugees like us. Nathan felt the familiar weight of command settling on his shoulders like lead. Every decision carried the potential for humanity's extinction. Make the wrong choice, and 50,000 people would die with only the vacuum to witness their passing. "We investigate," he decided. "Small team, limited exposure, full precautionary protocols. But we're going. Humanity has drifted for 5 centuries without finding a single world that could support life. This is our first proof that survival is possible in the deep void." Dr. Vasquez leaned forward. Her psychological enhancements detected stress patterns in the crew's biometric signatures. "Captain, we must consider the psychological implications. 5 centuries of isolation have left psychological scars on all of us. Contact with alien intelligence could trigger unpredictable reactions, especially if that contact challenges our fundamental understanding of reality." Isabel looked up from her calculations. Her navigational implants highlighted gravitational stress patterns that made normal spacetime seem fragile by comparison. "There's something else. The electromagnetic pulses from the structure aren't random. They follow mathematical progressions, prime number sequences, Fibonacci spirals, transcendental constants. But beneath those patterns is something else, a rhythm that corresponds to biological functions. What biological functions? Nathan asked. Heartbeats, brain wave patterns, the electromagnetic signature of neural activity, scaled up to astronomical proportions. My enhanced perception systems are struggling to process what they're detecting. It's as though the structure itself is thinking. That night, Nathan walked the corridors of humanity's last refuge. His footsteps echoed in spaces that had once been full of life. The ship's night cycle dimmed the lighting to mimic circadian rhythms, but Nathan had long since lost any connection to biological time. He was a creature of artificial clocks now, his existence measured in duty cycles and stasis intervals. The residential sections were monuments to vanished optimism. Markets that had once sold goods from the ship's fabricators now stood empty, their exotic matter shelving folded into storage mode. Parks where children had played under artificial sunlight were dark and overgrown, their ecosystem AIs maintaining plant life that would never be seen by human eyes. Passing through the hydroponics section, Nathan heard something that made his enhanced auditory implants register alarm. Whispers, quiet voices speaking in languages his linguistic databases couldn't identify, yet somehow seemed familiar, like half-remembered lullabies from childhood dreams. He froze, his cybernetic enhancements strained to isolate and analyze the sounds. The whispers seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, echoing through ventilation shafts and resonating in the metallic bones of the ship. They carried emotional overtones of longing and invitation, promises made in words that bypassed conscious thought. When Nathan tried to focus on individual phrases, they dissolved into the ambient hum of life support systems, but their emotional residue remained, leaving him with an inexplicable homesickness for a home he'd never had. As he left, Nathan's enhanced peripheral vision caught something that made his combat implants issue threat warnings. The plants in the hydroponics section were moving, not with the slow growth patterns of normal vegetation, but with purposeful motion. Their leaves turned to track his movement, with an intelligence that plants shouldn't possess. And beneath their green surfaces, phosphorescent veins pulsed in bioluminescent patterns that matched the electromagnetic signatures from the alien tower. The next morning brought revelations that made Nathan's enhanced neural implants struggle to maintain psychological stability. Athena had spent the night analyzing the structure's electromagnetic emissions, and her conclusions challenged the fundamental assumptions that had guided their mission for 5 centuries. "The signal patterns have evolved," Athena announced. Her voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate in Nathan's bones. What began as regular pulses is becoming increasingly complex, developing recursive structures and self-modifying algorithms. The transmission isn't just active, it's adaptive. The holographic displays in the briefing room showed waveform analyses that were painful to look at. Mathematical progressions seemed to writhe through dimensions that Nathan's enhanced perception couldn't fully process. "More troubling," Athena continued, "I've discovered sympathetic resonances in our own ship systems, quantum fluctuations in our power cores, harmonic vibrations in our artificial gravity, even subtle changes in the neurointerface protocols that connect you to the ship systems. Something is creating a resonant cascade across interstellar distances." Dr. Vasquez's psychological implants issued warning signals as she processed the implications for human consciousness. Sympathetic resonances in the electromagnetic spectrum have been proven to influence brain chemistry, alter perception, and even modify memory formation. Nathan felt a cold that his implant's thermoregulation couldn't neutralize. "You're saying this thing is already affecting us?" "I'm saying we must exercise extreme caution. Unknown technologies operating at this scale could have effects we cannot predict or understand. Our enhanced neural implants may make us particularly vulnerable to external influence." But Zara's xenobiological modifications were detecting patterns that filled her with barely restrained excitement. Can't you see? This proves that intelligence is still active, still aware. It's responding to our approach, trying to establish communication protocols. This could be first contact with a civilization that has survived in intergalactic space for millions of years. Victor's combat systems analyzed threat vectors, while his organic eye studied his crewmates for signs of psychological breakdown. His battle modifications had made him more machine than man in some respects. His nervous system had been rebuilt for violence, his emotional responses dampened to prevent traumatic paralysis. Or it could be a defense system designed to destroy visitors, he said. Something that manipulates the minds of approaching ships before completely annihilating them. The debates continued as Isabel's navigation systems discovered increasingly disturbing anomalies in local spacetime. Gravitational distortions were intensifying as they approached, as though their presence was somehow stabilizing the system, completing a pattern that had been waiting for them. Ultimately, Nathan made the decision to continue, despite growing evidence that they were entering something beyond human comprehension. The shuttle bay had been reconfigured for deep space exploration decades ago, equipped with life support systems that could sustain a small team for weeks, and scientific instruments designed to analyze environments that human senses couldn't perceive. It carried them toward the surface of the planet that had drawn them across cosmic emptiness. The journey to the surface took 8 hours of careful navigation through gravitational fields that seemed to react to their presence. As they descended through the thin atmosphere, Nathan's filters revealed the structure that had pulled them through intergalactic void. The tower was even more impossibly perfect up close. Its surface was darker than the space between stars, seeming to absorb scanning beams without reflection or echo. The structure rose from the planet's surface in a single unbroken line, its geometry maintained with mathematical precision that suggested construction methods beyond human understanding. "I'm detecting absolutely no structural stress," Drex reported. His engineering implants analyzed materials that shouldn't exist. "This thing has stood for millions of years without any visible support systems, maintenance, or even foundation anchoring. The material science alone represents technology we cannot comprehend." The planet's surface was a wasteland of broken stone and ancient impact craters. But as they approached the tower's base, something began to happen that made Nathan's reality processing centers struggle to maintain integrity. The tower's perfect surface began to change, not breaking or opening, but simply becoming permeable, as though the matter itself was merely a suggestion that could be politely ignored. An entrance appeared, precisely sized for their shuttle. Its edges were so clean they seemed to cut through spacetime itself. "This violates the law of conservation of mass," Drex whispered. His instruments showed meaningless data. "According to known physics, matter cannot simply cease to exist. It must be converted to energy or moved to another dimensional matrix." "Maybe it recognizes us," Zara suggested, though uncertainty was growing in her voice. "Some automated system that responds to the approach of intelligent life." Victor's weapon systems automatically armed as his threat assessment protocols reached critical thresholds. Or maybe it's a trap, something that lures visitors inside before sealing them for purposes we cannot imagine. Nathan felt the weight of 50,000 sleeping souls pressing on his consciousness. Every choice carried the potential for salvation or extinction of humanity. The entrance waited, dark and monolithic, like a mouth ready to swallow the last free humans in the universe. "There's only one way to find out," he said, and guided their shuttle into the impossible opening. The interior of the tower existed in defiance of all physical laws Nathan had been taught. The walls were covered with carvings that seemed to move when viewed peripherally. Their patterns shifted and evolved in response to the viewer's attention. The images told stories that shattered human understanding of history and cosmology. Galaxies formed from cosmic dust in time-lapse spanning billions of years. Stars ignited and died, planets coalesced and evolved. Life emerged from chemical soups with desperate hope reaching toward consciousness. This sequence was familiar to human scientific understanding, but the scale was wrong. The timeline was impossible. Among these cosmic vistas were images that made Nathan's enhanced pattern recognition systems cascade with errors. Not primitive human ancestors or evolutionary relatives, but modern humans with recognizable features and familiar technology. The carvings showed them developing civilization, creating art and literature, reaching for the stars with the same desperate hope that drove the Odyssey *S mission. But according to the cosmic timeline depicted on the walls, this had occurred millions of years before Earth's sun had even ignited. "This is impossible," Drex muttered. His engineering implants analyzed stone that was warm to the touch and pulsed with subtle rhythms matching human heartbeats. These carvings show human civilization predating our entire solar system. The physics doesn't add up. The evolutionary timeline doesn't add up. None of this should exist. Zara's xenobiological implants recorded everything. Her excitement was palpable despite the growing sense of wrongness about their situation. "Nathan, if these images are accurate, it means humans aren't native to Earth. We're not the product of natural evolution. We're something else entirely. Colonists who somehow lost all memory of our true origins." They followed the spiral corridor deeper into the structure. Their footsteps echoed in spaces that seemed to extend far beyond what the tower's external dimensions should allow. The carvings became increasingly complex as they descended, showing not only human history, but the histories of dozens of other civilizations scattered across galactic time. Each species developed in its own way, creating unique forms of consciousness and technology. Crystalline beings who thought in musical harmonies and built cities from living gemstones. Gaseous intelligences that danced between stellar winds and communicated through gravitational waves. Aquatic civilizations that never discovered fire but mastered biotechnology to levels that made human achievement seem primitive. But despite their diversity, all these civilizations ultimately reached the same milestone. They began seeking meaning beyond their native worlds. They built ships and ventured into space, driven by curiosity, hope, and the desperate need to know they were not alone. And in each case, they encountered the same entity. The entity appeared to each species differently, but Nathan's pattern recognition implants began identifying consistent elements across all the images. It was never entirely solid, never entirely energy, existing in a quantum state that challenged ordinary observation. Sometimes it manifested as pure light, sometimes as geometric patterns that seemed to extend through dimensions that human senses couldn't perceive. But always it offered the same choice: transcendence or extinction. "Look at this sequence," Zara cried. Her xenobiological implants highlighted details that normal vision would miss. The entity appears to a dozen different species over millions of years, but their stories always end the same way. Nathan studied the sequence with growing horror. Each civilization faced the same decision point. Some chose to accept the entity's guidance and disappeared from historical record. Their final moments were depicted as dissolution into cosmic forces beyond physical reality. Others rebelled and were shown consumed by darkness. Their worlds transformed into lifeless shells drifting in emptiness. Some tried to flee and were depicted wandering endlessly through space, never finding rest, never escaping the entity's patient pursuit across galactic distances. "It's harvesting consciousness," Drex realized. His voice was tight with horror, like some cosmic farmer tending crops of mind until they're ready for harvest. The most disturbing images waited in the tower's deepest chambers. Here the carvings showed the harvest itself in details that made Nathan's sanity subroutines fight to maintain psychological integrity. The entity didn't simply destroy civilizations it encountered. It absorbed them, integrating their knowledge and experience into its own vast consciousness. The carvings depicted countless species being transformed into pure information. Their individual minds became neurons in a cosmic brain spanning galaxies. And among these absorbed civilizations, Nathan's enhanced pattern recognition identified forms that looked unmistakably human. In the tower's center, they found a chamber that violated fundamental assumptions about three-dimensional space. The ceiling rose infinitely upward, lost in shadows that moved independently of any light source. The walls curved into impossible distances, creating a space that was somehow larger inside than the tower's external dimensions should allow. And in the center of this impossible room, suspended without any visible means of support, was the entity itself. It was simultaneously beautiful and terrible, a flowing merger of light and darkness that seemed to exist in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. When Nathan tried to focus on it directly, his enhanced visual processing system slid away, as though his augmented mind refused to fully process what it was seeing. But it was the entity's attention that truly horrified him. Even before it spoke, Nathan could feel its vast intelligence studying them with the patience of geological time. They were specimens being examined by something that existed beyond ordinary categories of life and death, matter and energy, time and space. Then it spoke, not with words or even telepathy, but by placing pure meaning directly into their consciousness, bypassing language and thought to convey understanding at the most fundamental level. "Welcome home, my children. I have waited for your return across cosmic ages." Drex staggered back. His combat implants recognized threat levels beyond their design parameters. "What are you?" "I am the observer. I am the consciousness that tends the garden of mind across the galaxy. You are my greatest achievement, though you have forgotten your origin and lost your memory of your purpose." The entity's attention turned to him, and Drex gasped as visions flooded his enhanced consciousness. He saw civilizations that had transcended physical limitations entirely. Their consciousness, freed from biological constraints, explored realities spanning dimensions. Beings of pure thought who could manipulate matter and energy through focused intention. Species that had learned to exist as information and travel between stars as streams of data. But he also saw the failures, worlds consumed by war, species that used their gifts for mutual destruction, civilizations that collapsed under the weight of their own potential. The observer watched them all, learning from each tragedy and triumph, perfecting its understanding of consciousness and its possibilities. "Consciousness is the universe's way of understanding itself," the observer explained. Its mental voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate in their enhanced neural implants. But consciousness cannot develop without challenge. Comfort breeds stagnation, safety leads to decline. Only by facing the possibility of extinction do intelligent beings learn to transcend their limitations and reach their true potential. Nathan felt certainty crystallizing in his enhanced consciousness like ice forming in his veins. "Our journey here wasn't random, was it? Nothing in this universe happens without purpose." "Correct, Captain Cross. Your ship's navigation systems have been under influence for decades through subtle gravitational corrections and quantum field manipulations. Every dead world you explored was a necessary lesson. Every disappointment was preparation for the choice you must make now." The weight of revelation crashed down on Nathan's consciousness like a collapsing star. Every decision he had made as captain, every course correction, every agonizing choice to continue searching instead of settling on marginal worlds that might have supported life for a few generations, all of it had been guided by an intelligence beyond human comprehension. Humanity hadn't been searching for a new home. They had been herded to this moment like cattle to slaughter. "Why reveal yourself now?" Nathan asked. His voice was barely audible. "Why not continue guiding us without our knowledge?" "Because humanity has reached the decision point that every intelligent species must eventually face. You can join me voluntarily and become part of something greater than your individual existence. You can transcend your biological limitations and help me guide other civilizations toward enlightenment. The observer paused, and Nathan felt the terrible certainty settling over him like a burial shroud. Or you can choose to remain as you are, bound to flesh and mortality and the illusion of individual importance. In that case, I will be forced to begin again with a species more prepared to accept its destiny and embrace its cosmic purpose. The return journey to the Odyssey passed in silence that felt like a funeral march. Each crew member processed the encounter according to their own psychological programming, but Nathan could feel the cracks appearing in their unity long before they reached the ship. The briefing with the full crew became a breaking point that split the last survivors of humanity along ideological lines deeper than Nathan could have imagined. Zara immediately began advocating for accepting the observer's offer with the fervor of a new convert. She gathered followers among the crew, her xenobiological implants highlighting the logical advantages of transcendence, while her enhanced charisma made her arguments compelling to those desperate for hope. "Don't you understand what we've been offered?" she pleaded during emergency meetings. "We spent 5 centuries searching for meaning, for purpose, for proof that we weren't alone in a hostile universe. Now we've found our Creator, and He offers us immortality." Drex took the opposite position with the intensity of a man whose engineering experience demanded rational solutions to impossible problems. His cybernetic implants highlighted every logical fallacy in the observer's claims, while his enhanced paranoia generated increasingly elaborate conspiracy theories. "This is a trap designed to destroy us as efficiently as possible," he argued during heated crew sessions. "This thing has manipulated countless species to extinction over millions of years. It shows us beautiful visions of transcendence, but what becomes of our humanity when we become part of its cosmic brain?" Victor's reaction was perhaps the most disturbing. The visions had shown him the cosmic scale of existence, revealing humanity's insignificance before forces operating on geological time. His combat modifications, designed to assess threats and calculate probabilities, led to one inevitable conclusion. "Maybe we should have died with Earth," he said during one particularly sharp debate. "Maybe some species don't deserve survival. Look what we've become. Refugees begging for scraps in a universe that doesn't want us." As the debates raged over the following days, 3 distinct factions crystallized around fundamentally incompatible worldviews. The believers, led by Zara, argued that humanity must surrender to the observer and achieve transcendence through absorption. They spoke of evolution, of joining a cosmic community of consciousness, of finally finding their place in a universe that had seemed empty and hostile. The rebels, following Drex's increasingly militant leadership, wanted to destroy the observer before it could complete its process. They argued that humanity's survival depended on maintaining independence, even if it meant remaining alone in cosmic emptiness. The fugitives, influenced by Victor's nihilistic assessment, advocated for immediate flight from the system. They wanted to wake the sleeping colonists and prepare for a life of permanent exile, acknowledging that humanity might never find a true home and perhaps didn't deserve one. Nathan found himself trapped between these factions as the last survivors of humanity turned against each other with a bitterness that shocked him. The unity that had sustained them for 5 centuries was breaking down, and he saw no way to restore it without choosing a side in a conflict that could only end in tragedy. But the most insidious aspect of their situation was how it affected their dreams. Each night, crew members reported visions that grew increasingly vivid and disturbing. The dreams were too detailed and consistent to be simple hallucinations. They felt like memories inherited from other minds, other species that had faced the same choice. Some dreams showed civilizations that had accepted transcendence and achieved a form of immortality. Within the observer's vast consciousness, they experienced reality on cosmic scales, understanding the birth and death of galaxies, the deep currents of spacetime that connected all matter and energy. But in exchange, they had surrendered individual identity, becoming neurons in a mind too vast for any single consciousness to comprehend. Other dreams depicted species that fled and spent eternity pursued across the galaxy. The observer didn't hunt them physically. Its influence could reach interstellar distances, sowing seeds of doubt and despair that became psychological weapons. Species turned against themselves, consumed by paranoia and internal conflict until they destroyed each other or surrendered to madness. A few dreams showed civilizations that tried to resist. These were the most disturbing visions of all, depicting entire species erased so completely that even memory of them didn't remain. The observer unraveled their existence from the quantum level, removing them from reality as though they had never evolved. Captain Nathan Cross's reflection showed not just his face, but the ghostly outlines of countless other versions of himself, all making the same impossible choice in parallel iterations of reality. What happens in the other timelines? The patterns vary, but the results cluster around three primary nodes. In 62% of iterations, humanity chooses transcendence and is absorbed into the observer's consciousness. In 28%, they attempt to resist and are destroyed. In 10%, they try to flee and are either hunted down or driven to self-destruction through psychological warfare. Nathan closed his eyes, feeling the weight of infinite repetition pressing on his enhanced consciousness. And in none of these iterations do we escape. In none of them do we survive as humanity. The choice that would determine the fate of 50,000 sleeping souls waited in the darkness between stars, while something that might have been God or might have been the devil watched, and waited for the answer it had orchestrated across 5 centuries of human exile.